Welcome to Off Balance, the podcast where faith, family, and business collide. I'm Dr. Brooks, a certified master life coach, transformational speaker, and author. Join me as we explore the journey of overcoming adversity and developing resilience. It's time for you to find your strength and reclaim balance. This is Off Balance. Hey everyone, welcome back to Off Balance. Today's episode, I am going to talk about military spouses who currently work remote for the federal government. So if you are someone you know is a military spouse working a remote position, then this episode is for you. So with the recent return to office directive from President Trump, many federal employees are required to return to in-person work. But there's an important exemption: military spouses and foreign service spouses. So today I am going to discuss why this exemption exists and what it means for you and what documents you need to submit to qualify. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the memorandum, it was addressed to heads and acting heads of department and agencies, and it was from Charles Ezell, which at the time was the acting director for the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, which is called OPM, and it's dated February 12th. And it was the guidance on exempting military spouses and foreign service spouses from agency return to office plans. And so I am going to read the memo, and then I'm going to tell you what does that mean for you as a military spouse. So the purpose: the U.S. Office of Personnel Management is issuing this memorandum to provide further guidance on implementation of the President's Return to Office Directive. This guidance clarifies that the spouses of active duty members of the U.S. Armed Forces on remote work are categorically exempt. Agencies shall allow military spouses to continue in existing remote work arrangements regardless of whether they are appointed under the Military Spouse Employment Act authorities, and may continue to appoint military spouses to remote work positions. This guidance also applies to spouses of members of the U.S. Foreign Services who are who are on overseas assignments. So what's the background? On January 20th, 2025, President Trump signed the presidential memorandum, Return to In-Person Work. That PM directed agencies to take all necessary steps to terminate remote work arrangements and require employees to return to work in person at their respective duty stations on a full-time basis, provided that the department and agency heads could make exemptions they deem necessary. On January 27th, OPM and the U.S. Office of Management and Budget, which is OMB, issued implementation guidance. That guidance directed agencies to prepare implementation plans to return all eligible employees to in-person work instead of remote or telework arrangements. The guidance explained that eligible employees did not include those excused due to a compelling reason certified by the agency head and the employee's supervisor. And so basically, if you probably was already on some type of reasonable accommodation or some type of compassion assignment or something like that, then they're saying that the agency head could still exempt you. And so the guidance instructed agencies that military spouses working remotely had a compelling reason not to return to in-person work. And that is Title V of the United States Code. It provides for military spouses to be non-competitively appointed to positions in which they will engage in remote work. Military spouses are consistently not eligible employees covered by return to work plans. And it says OMB and OPM's guidance instructed agencies to create appropriate discrete categories of exemptions from return to work office plan, including for military spouses. So here's the implementation. Agencies should accordingly ensure that their return to office plans categorically exempt all military spouses authorized to engage in remote work. This includes both military spouses appointed under the Military Spouse Employment Act authorities and those appointed under other hiring authorities. So what do they mean by this? So if you notice, when you see announcements on USA Jobs, if you see open to military spouses, then that's what they mean by under the military spouse appointing authority. However, some people that are currently in the federal government, say for instance, if they apply for a merit promotion announcement, they can apply using their current status. So whether they're a career or if they're a career conditional, and then you have some military spouses that could be Schedule A, which means they have a disability, or they can be a veteran themselves and they can apply for a position using their veteran's preference. And so basically what this memo is saying is that the spouse could have been appointed under the Military Spouse Employment Act authority or those appointed under other hiring authorities. So it does not matter what hiring authority you use to get the position that you're in. If you are a military spouse by definition of this memorandum, and if you meet the criteria of this memorandum, then you are exempt from returning to work. It says agencies may also continue to appoint military spouses to remote work positions pursuant to the Military Spouse Employment Act or other appropriate hiring authorities. This directive covers any spouse of members of the armed forces on active duty, as well as a spouse of a disabled or deceased member of the armed forces. The term active duty includes any member of the armed forces covered by 10 USC 101 D1, as well as any members performing full-time National Guard duty as defined in 10 USC 101 D5. For members of reserve components as described in 10 USC 101, active duty does not include individuals performing training, duties, or in attendance at a service school. So if they are in the reserve, they have to be called to active duty, and it can't be for training and it can't be for school. So essentially for the reserve, it will have to be like if, they had to deploy for a campaign or some type of war. And then it goes, a spouse of a disabled member of the armed forces is an individual who married a member of the armed forces who, on the date that the member retired, was released, or discharged from the armed forces, had a disability rating of 100% under the standard schedule of rating disabilities in use by the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. See, this is very important because years ago when military members either retired, ETS, got out, whatever they did, they was not getting their VA ratings at the time. But now they get their ratings. Typically, if they do everything that they are supposed to do as they are out processing, as they are about to transition, they will have their rating at the time of separation. So that is a catch for this. If your spouse is disabled and they are 100%, that 100% had to be attained at the time of separation, which, let's say, for instance, if their DD 214, the last day says December 31st, 2021, and their VA letter says January 1st, 2022, then they meet the requirements of this particular memo. But say they got out December 31st, 2021, and they didn't get their 100% rating until February of 2022, then this is not applicable if you are trying to qualify as a disabled spouse. And then it says, a spouse of a deceased member of the armed forces is an individual who was married to a member of the armed forces on the date on which the member died while on active duty and who has not remarried. So for this one, your spouse had to have died on active duty and you cannot have remarried. And then it says this guidance also covers spouses of U.S. Foreign Service members who are on overseas assignments. Agencies should ensure that the spouses of the U.S. Foreign Service members on overseas assignments are exempted from any return to office requirements. In addition, spouses of U.S. Foreign Service members on overseas assignments may continue to be hired to remote work positions consistent with 22 U.S.C. 4026B. And it says agencies should ensure that all such military and foreign service spouses are permitted to continue with any applicable remote work arrangements. So I read it because I wanted to ensure that you understand what it is that I'm talking about. And so again, this is very, very good news for those military spouses because it exempts you from returning to the office. And so I like the fact that the exemption applies to military spouses, whether or not they were appointed under the Military Spouse Employment Act. And so here are the three categories: Spouses of active duty armed forces member, including those on full-time National Guard duty, spouses of disabled veterans with a 100% VA disability rating, and they had to have got their rating at the time of separation. And then spouses of deceased service members, provided that they have not remarried. So if you fit into any of these categories, you are exempt from returning to in-person work. And so you just need to make sure that you have your documentation together. And you need to make sure that when your agency reaches out to you for, or when they announce the compelling reasons, then most agencies, this will fall under compelling reason. And then you would just need to submit your documentation. And so what documents would you need? And so for military spouses, you're going to need a copy of your spouse's, if you're active duty. So if you are a current spouse of an active duty member, you're going to need a copy of your spouse's active duty orders showing their assignment. You're going to need your marriage certificate to prove the relationship, right? And then it's say, for instance, if you are a military spouse of a disabled veteran, you're going to need a copy of the DD-214, and you're going to need a copy of the VA letter, and you're going to need a copy of your marriage certificate. And that's how you're going to prove that. If you are claiming it because of a deceased spouse, then you're going to need the same thing. You're going to need the copy of the actual death certificate. You're going to need that marriage certificate showing that you guys were married, and also showing, that you haven't remarried. And then you will also need the DD-214 as well. And so for foreign spouses, you're going to need a copy of the overseas assignment orders and your marriage certificate. These documents, again, they're going to be submitted to your HR department as soon as they begin requesting it. And so you just want to make sure you have it. Now, if you are currently the spouse of a member of a disabled veteran, and let's just say that disabled veteran is permanent and totally disabled, and they don't currently work for the federal government, then you can also request that you receive the 10-point veterans preference, as well as veteran preference for RIF. So what you would need for that is you would still need that VA letter showing that they are permanent and total disabled, and you would need the SF-15. You would fill that out and say that they don't currently work for the federal government. And then you would need your marriage certificate. And then you can get box 23 on your SF-50. They will change that to 5. And then you would get box 26 changed to yes. So if your spouse is disabled, again, and they are permanent and total disabled, and they don't work for the government, then you can use their veterans preference for a RIF. And so you would want to submit that documentation to your HR department to get that updated. So if you are a military spouse, just make sure your records are up to date. Make sure you have all the paperwork that you need, and make sure that you let your agency know that you are exempt from returning to work. It doesn't matter if you live within 50-mile radius. None of that stuff matters. This particular memo is exempting military spouses from returning to work. So if you know a military spouse and they kind of have questions about it, make sure you share this episode with them. Make sure you guys comment, like, and stay tuned for more episodes as it relates to what's going on in the federal government. I think I am going to do another episode about reduction in force, because even though I did one, I didn't go into depth, and people still had questions about it. So I would probably do another episode about that as well. So again, if you guys need any information about what's going on with the federal government, just let me know, and I will do my best to share that information with you. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to like this episode, rate it, share it with your friends and family, and just know that we are going to get through whatever we're going through, because we have to trust and believe that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. I can't force you to believe what I believe, but I know that we serve the one true living God, and he is a just God. He is a God that is sovereign. And in the same way that, he's intervening and allowing people to be returned to their job, I don't want you guys to stress. I know it may seem rocky. I know things may seem a little uncertain right now, but we have to trust that God is still in control. So again, blessings to you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to rate this episode and share it with your family and friends. To learn more about your host, visit brooksdemming.com. Until next time, be resilient.
Hi, I'm Tiffany of Tiffany Brown Designs. With over 20 years of creative experience across industries, I create and elevate brands one design at a time through intentional graphic and brand design, polished film and video editing, and creative artistry. Even the music you're hearing right now, that was produced by me. I also create custom tracks for websites, intros and outros, and content. So what are you waiting for? Visit TiffanyCBrownGD.com and let's bring your vision to life.